Today's video is going to be something you guys have already seen. Pretty much everything I did in the last video, but I'm going to do it step by step this time around so people can have more of an understanding on how to do this. The handbrake setup is really simple. Notching your e-brake over can be just a little annoying, especially if you have interior. I don't have interior, so I'm not quite sure how everybody was fitting that thing with interior because it was really tight fit, especially with my stock seat. I'm going to show you guys how to bolt up the dual caliper system on the rear of the S13. Hopefully today we can get all my lines ran through the car and everything flared up and get the handbrake actually working and fully functional. So let's get started, guys. First things first, when you get your tire off, you're going to want to take out your axle nut. Last night I removed my cotter pin. I had already taken everything apart and I was planning on doing it last night, but obviously you guys are watching the second part how-to video, so I didn't do it. You want to break your axle nut free, remove it, and then you're going to pull off your factory brake caliper. And that's a 36mm. Then you're going to want to grab a 14mm socket and make sure you drop your e-brake if you pulled your e-brake to get your lug nut or your axle nut off. And it's a 14mm again to get this caliper off. And that's for the caliper itself. You're also going to have to pull the main caliper bracket. I'll get you guys that size when we move on to that point. You guys can get a better look at what I'm doing in here. Stick my caliper up in there. And then we're also going to have to remove these right here. You guys can see that. This is the caliper bracket. This is what holds your caliper. Obviously your caliper is bolted to it. And then that allows you to remove your rotor. This is a 17mm on the back side of this. And this top one, if your car is slammed like mine, you might need a wrench. I don't think you guys can see that one. It's all the way up top up here. I think you guys get the point though. I'll show you it just one more time so you could get a better understanding. It's this bolt right here, and then obviously that one. It's not that one, this lower one. Let me get this off, guys, and then we'll pull the caliper or the rotor off. Alright, caliper bracket is off. This allows you to pull your rotor off. Set that to the side. Now the next thing to do is get these 4 bolts that hold your wheel bearing on. Spray a little bit of a PB blaster on there. Let them sit for just a couple minutes. If you haven't done them in quite a while, if you have, or if you have been behind your car, you already know how to do this. You're just waiting for me to get to the actual brake installation. I'm going to go ahead and grab the socket and the extension and start breaking these free. I've got the caliper bracket set aside with the 2 spacers that Villains provides for you. That's going to offset the caliper bracket so that way it sits with the rotor and the second caliper. And I've also got the second caliper bracket that's going to be sandwiched behind the wheel bearing and the actual hub of the vehicle. To get the hub itself off, I've got a 3/4 inch socket here. I think that's equivalent to like 21 or something if you don't have a 3/4. I don't have a 21 in my 3/8 driver. I've got a little extension. I'm going to go ahead and just bust all these bolts loose, get ready to pull off my hub so that way I can start sandwiching my plate behind and mocking up for this second caliper. Alright guys, once you remove all 4 of these hub bolts, your hub might be seized on there. Just take a rubber mallet and do a little bit of convincing. Might take a few hits, get mine off, and then I'll check in with you guys once I'm done. You might need a little more convincing than a rubber mallet. I had to take a hammer and my little chisel here and just knock behind it a few times, just in a few areas just to get it. I had to hit it like one good time right under here to actually like get it to go under, and then after that it was all good. So I'm just gonna clean this up with some brake cleaner and stuff, clean these threads. I probably could use some anti-seize. I think I have a little bit in my toolbox, so I'm gonna throw that on there. Once I get all this stuff cleaned up and everything all pretty, we're going to sandwich the plate on here for the dual caliper. It'll sit like so, and then we'll put our hub back on and start putting everything back together. Alright guys, I've got everything cleaned up. I got a little ahead of myself. Before we go sandwiching these plates, I almost forgot to mention there's some casting numbers right here. Villains, on their little YouTube video, it's not exactly a how-to, it's just kind of giving you an idea of what you need to do for it. But they want you to grind down these casting numbers here, and then also grind down this edge so that this sits flush against the knuckle, and also so the caliper, the casting of the caliper can clear this. A lot of people, I guess, are a little worried with grinding it. I just took mine and just started going to town with it and made it a nice U shape. I didn't go too deep, but deep enough to know that the caliper will clear it. And if you guys want to see on the other side, for an example, if you look in there, it's been all ground down to clear, and I can almost stick my finger in there, almost. It clears it by a good 1/4 of an inch. Now some people don't have to grind down anything, but Villain recommends it either way, so that way when you go to put everything together, you're not stuck in a position where you're like second calipers like cockeyed or not sitting the way that it's supposed to and rubbing against your rotor, and then you're in another world of trouble. So we're gonna go ahead and grind that casting number down and this edge with my flap disc, wherever it went. There it is. Just a cheap little 80 grit flap disc. Oh, 120 grit, my bad guys. There you guys have it. Everything grounded down. Now we are good to start throwing everything back together with our sandwich plate and then our hub, then bolting them back down where the bolts are over there, and you know, just kind of doing everything in reverse. Some people cut out a spot or like a notch for the second caliper, but I did that last night and I went through all the trouble, and when I mocked it up, it barely even cleared. So mine's all nice and pretty and notched out, and I went over it with the flap wheel, and I couldn't really get it to fit properly, and plus it was just annoying. And so that's your call if you want to do it. I sprayed a little bit of primer on my area where I grounded down so it doesn't rust. We're gonna start throwing everything together right now, and I'm gonna try to see if I can set you guys up. Again, this is gonna be a little difficult to film. Alright guys, so I put a little bit of anti-seize on my splines here. Ignore that car in the background, whatever awful noise it's making. If you guys can't hear that, I've got my mount for my secondary caliper. I'm just gonna line it up on here. I've got 2 of the bolts from the wheel bearing already through there to kind of give myself something to line up when I'm putting it on. I'm just going to put a dab of little Loctite on here so that way they don't back out. So just the tiniest little dab, doesn't need much. We're going to be able to get these things back out later. Car vibrates a lot, you know, you're not going to have a lot of wheel hop. When you're in drift, you definitely want to be particular about the parts that you don't want coming loose. It's kind of a big deal. But you just simply slide it on like so. It's going to be a tight fit because you're sandwiching that plate in there. And it might be a little finicky trying to line up the bolts in the back. Got to be patient and work with it. Alright, I got those first two started. I'm going to go ahead and slide in my other two bottom ones. I'm not going to forget to put a little drop of Loctite on these guys. I'm talking just the littlest bit. I know I said it once before, but I'm saying it again because I know some people like to get Loctite happy or don't really know what they're doing when they're using the Loctite. They just like throw it on there and then next thing you know, you're trying to pull off something that has been Loctited on there for 6 months. Hopefully I'm not blocking the camera too much. So shout out to the sun who created all the light pollution in that last clip while I was tightening everything up. The bolts for the hubs are in there, all 4 of them. I've got them torqued down to about 75 foot-pounds. I went back over just to make sure that my caliper was going to clear. Grabbed my caliper, slid it over. Clears all day. You guys can see that little gap there. Now, Villains provides a little shim. It looks like this. It is for a 4 or 5 lug car. This is what's going to shim out your rotor so that everything lines up. Don't forget to throw that on there. Also, you're going to want to throw your axle nut and your washer on. Tighten that up. But when you go to install the rotor and the caliper, you have to put the second caliper on first and line it up at the same time that you do the rotor, if that makes sense. You can't put the caliper on without the rotor, because if you put the caliper on, you can't get the rotor over your caliper, and vice versa. You put the rotor on, you won't be able to get your caliper over your rotor. So you have to go on at the same time so you can slide them over the little bolts that are back there. And Villains provides you with hardware. You have to sneak back up in there. It's a little difficult, but you have to sneak up in there and throw these nuts on those studs. And the last thing are these little spacers here. These little spacers are going to go in between the mounting hardware for the caliper, not the caliper itself, but the mounting bracket for the caliper. It's going to offset it so that it sits evenly with this rotor. So let me get to screwing these little nuts on the back here, and once I get that all tightened up, I will show you guys the finished product, and then I will show you guys this little trick with those little spacers or washers. I've got my hardware installed. My caliper is not going anywhere. It will drive you up the wall. Might take a couple cuss words, and you might throw a wrench because it is a little finicky getting it back there. Don't throw the nut. You can throw a wrench, but don't throw the nut that you use because you kind of need those. But they're in there now. We're going to move over to the second part. Basically throwing everything back together. You cannot forget those little spacers. So what I do, I slide it through here. And then I just take my little spacer and set it on like that. Same thing with the bottom. I just peek it through a little bit. Oops, sorry guys, I hit the camera. Peek it through a little bit and then set it like that. Now you can take your caliper mount. Oops, wrong way, Travis. And slide it up and over. And of course I'm filming and I knocked off the little washer, but you guys get the general idea. It's going to offset this caliper bracket so that way the factory caliper still works. Oh, look who it is. Yes, my girls. So let me bolt this up for you guys really quick. Wash her back on before I forget it, because then I'm going to bolt it up and forget. And then I'll show you the final product, because we are just about done. Just that easy. Slide those little spacers in there. Bolt it up just as you normally would. And voila! You have a dual caliper kit. There's nice play in between the dual caliper and the rotor. That way I know nothing's cocked, nothing's sitting sideways, this is straight. And I'm going to throw my factory caliper back on, see how it sits. Then we're going to have to start running some brake line. First I have to flare it. I'm not really excited to, but are you excited to flare it, Renegade? I got my shop dog with me. Factory caliper bolted up. As you guys can see, there's no drag, there's no resistance, there's a little bit of play in the rotor. That means we are good. We have no issues with anything skimming or dragging, calipers clearing, no binding, so that's awesome. I'm glad it went nice and smoothly. I had a little issue getting the bolts in the back for the hub in, just because of the I think the axle that's back here is a like an O'Reilly's or an Advanced Auto one. It doesn't have the little notched edges so you can fit the wrench in there, or excuse me, the socket. So I just had to hold it up there by hand and do that. But other than that, guys, there's the dual caliper setup. It is a very, very nice setup. A little pain to install, but it's definitely going to be well worth it in the long run. Now I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do exactly about, you know, running my soft lines, where I want to run these guys, and then where I want my hard line to connect, and then obviously run up to the master cylinder on the hydro. And I also have to go get some fluid. I don't have any brake fluid. Alrighty guys, so I guess let's get to flaring. I had to run to the parts store and grab a brake line cutting tool / line cutting tool, because I guess it's a little obnoxious to cut small 3/16 brake line tubing. And I also had to pick up some brake fluid. But I want to discuss my plan really quick with you guys. I think what I'm going to do is similar to what a lot of people have to do, is run the hard line up and over, but instead of doing it directly over top of it, I'm going to try to do it over on an angle and kind of follow the line of this factory e-brake, and then I'm going to send it right back here, and this is where my T is going to sit. I'm going to T it right here, and then I'm going to send a hard line into here. I'm going to notch these. These are for the factory seat belts, and I won't ever be using a factory setup in this car again, so I'm just going to run my drill in here and notch these out a little larger. That way the ends of the fittings can get through. The tube will fit, but I don't know if the fittings are going to fit all the way through. So I'm going to notch those out, and the T is going to send one side that way to the back driver, and then the other T is going to send it to the back passenger. And somewhere down in here is where I'm going to have them meet. If you guys look really closely, that hole that's right there, that hole, that's the factory seatbelt hole. So I'm just going to have it run out and run along the factory brake line up until that spot there. If you guys have a little flare tool kit, break that out at this point in time. Get your line cutter and go ahead and practice a couple flares. I'm probably going to flare this other side just to make sure I still got it. If you don't know how to flare, you probably shouldn't be doing this, but there's directions here in the rentals. YouTube it. It's really simple. It's not that hard. I'm just making fun of you guys. Love you. So before I get ahead of myself, I want to show you guys my progress. This isn't really a how-to part of it, because this is kind of, you know, if you want to do it your way, this way, that way, I'm just showing you the way that I'm doing it, guys. So there it is, cleared over. Coming down. I have it zip tied for right now. I think I'm going to get some line clamps and self-tap them to the body and just clamp the lines right there in place. And then underneath the vehicle, you can see the one side that I've already got done. I got the soft line mocked on it. I think I'm going to pour a little bit of fluid in it, do some testing before I put everything together to see if it leaks out of any of the fittings. So I'm going to flare this one, get the soft line on there, and then I'll check in with you guys after that. It is the following day. It got dark on me, and it was getting a little frustrating trying to work in the dark. I had my flashlight, but it was just hard to hold the flashlight and all the tools. Here's the final product. I have to do some bleeding today. I've got everything ran I did some testing, and that T-fitting was leaking at first. I had to go get another one. I'm not sure why it was leaking, and you can't really see it now, but there it is. You can kind of see it, the line. Everything's ran under and zip tied. I'm gonna jack it up and show you guys a little bit better. Give me 1 second. Here's the final product, guys. Here are the soft lines. I've got them zip tied along this trailing arm here. They run down and up along the factory line. Same thing with the other side. One issue I did notice, my wheel is rubbing. The black wheels, the factory wheels fit over it and don't even touch it, but that's the black wheel of mine. But I'll show you guys this side too. Same way. And it's ran up. You guys can see it right there next to the brake line. And I'll show you the inside one more time. I think you guys seen it 100 times, but just because I'm showing you. And it runs up, and you can see my handbrake is up and fully functional. So we've got to do a little more bleeding. They're not locking up all the way just yet. They're still a little spongy, so once I bleed them up, I think I'm going to do like a whole separate test drive video. I'll mount my GoPro and stuff. I'm going to do some bleeding. I'm going to see if my girlfriend can come out here and pull the handbrake while I crack open the lines. See if we can get everything bled out and get these things fully functional. And I'll probably close out the video after that. My girlfriend gave me a hand with bleeding the handbrake some more. She was in there just pulling the handbrake back while I popped open the bleeder valve with a little more air out of that, and the brake feels really good. So I put some drift spares on. To wrap this video up, I'm going to go try to possibly find a spot to do a couple figure eights and some donuts. So we'll go see how it does. We're back at the garage, guys. That was a fun little session destroying those streeties of mine. They're over there. I'm gonna have to show you really quick because they're showing wire. I went right through them just whipping donuts. I got a little carried away. It was a lot of fun. The handbrake is almost there. When you pull it, you can feel it almost lock up, but I think it needs just a little more bleeding and we'll be good. I'm really, really happy with the way it came out. I'm really happy with the setup, the design. Everything on the villain's end was awesome. The handbrake feels nice. It's nice and comfortable. The mount is pretty solid, and running all those lines and everything is pretty straightforward. It's kind of chaotic and a little bit of a nuisance, but once it's all said and done, it's well worth it. Let me show you guys these really quick. They are missing half the chunk of rubber and showing some wire. One thing I did notice though is that my lines are starting to rub a little bit, just a little bit, with those stock wheels and tires. I think what I'm gonna have to do is get some spacers for them. I don't really want my tires to like burn through the soft lines, so I think I'll get some spacers, offset them a little bit. These wheels and tires, they do fine. I don't have any issues with them, so that's just a little note for you guys. If you do have stock wheels, they will clear stock wheels, the calipers. It's just if you run the lines the way I did, you might run into the issue of the tire bumping against it. But anyways guys, that is a wrap for today. I'm gonna go ahead and get to uploading this video, actually editing and then uploading. I don't really have anything else for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Now that I've got my handbrake in, it's just a few more little odds and ends. You can go head down to the compound and do a little bit of drifting. Maybe we can find a big area where we can also practice some more figure eights and donuts. Once those tires, once they started getting slick, man, there was no holding those figure eights and those donuts. You just wanted to spin in circles. But that is all I've got for you guys. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. Deuces.